Right, good morning, gentlemen. Nice to be back. We left off on today's daf is daf Ayin Ches. Truth is, I have not checked the schedule probably in months, but I just do a blot a day, and so I assume this is what today's is. But anyways, so we left off towards the top of Ayin Ches, Amud Aleph. We were discussing yesterday. The last thing we finished off with in the morning was about a ziz. A ziz is like a little platform or ledge that sticks out of the wall. So we said over there, if it sticks out of the wall, now in order for it to basically considered to be like the ground, it has to be within three tefachim of the ground. Then if it's too high, then it's not considered to be attached to the ground. It can't really minimize the ground because you just have like a ledge sticking out in the air. Why should that minimize the height of the wall? So he said, as long as if there's a ladder there, there's a ladder that goes to this ledge, right? So then the ledge can be considered like the new ground, and therefore this ground, right, if between the ledge and the top of the wall is less than 10 tefachim, then all of a sudden you got yourself an opening that the wall is not as high, and therefore it could be a pesach into the chatzer next door. So we left off 4 lines in the top. The Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Avua. If you have a wall that's 19 tefachim, you could have, right, potentially a case of where you have one ledge that sticks out. So to fix it, why? You have basically the ledge at basically 9.5 tefachim, and therefore, right, from there to the top is less. Right, less than 10, and then underneath it you have a ladder, which we spoke about, and the ladder, each rungs are close within 3 tefachim one another, and it's not 4 tefachim wide, because it's 4 tefachim wide, that would be considered to be the ground. So therefore, since it's narrow, and therefore we can say it attaches to the one above it, to the one above it, to the one above it, finally till it hits the platform, and now the platform is the new floor, and therefore that's less than 10 tefachim. And therefore it can be matir with the chatzer next door because the wall is not big enough. Now, koisel esrim, however, if one is basically more than 20, you need 2 of them. Basically, you have to have like a connecting one. So in other words, you have to have, because if you have one, let's say it's 21, right? Because it's pointed out that if it's exactly 20, you can still have one in the middle because it takes up space, and therefore it's you could have 9.9 and 9.9 because then you have the thickness of the Z's that's sticking out. But let's say it's 22, right? So therefore you can't really fit this Z's anywhere. So but if you have 2 of them, right, then as long as you have this one, once again, one within the ground with a little ladder from there, and then there's basically a connection between the ladders between Z's number 1 and Z's number 2, and then between the top of the Z's number 2 and the top of the wall is less than 10 tefachim, everything would work out beautifully. However, it says, however, you have to have them 2 like next to each other. They can't be on top of each other because then there's really no way you can put a ladder, right, lean it up against the other one. As long as you can basically put a ladder, right, from one ledge to the other ledge, then you're able to go ahead and connect the 2, and therefore that the top one can be the new ground, and therefore it's less than 10 tefachim. And there's a picture of it here in the art scroll. In this case over here, those who don't have it, you can see the picture there with the 2 Z's that stick out. Fine. So it says the Gemara. So now another case, or a similar case, but not really off the topic. If you have a stand in the middle of the Shus Harabim, and this is 10 tefachim tall and 4x4 wide. So we learned earlier that something is 10 tall and 4x4 wide. It's now on top of it is considered its own Rishus HaYachid. The nuts, but yes, and it's exactly 4x4, and you take a stake and you go ahead and you put it right in the top. You just pop it in, and now it's sticking in there. It's sticking in this wood platform on top. So it's taking up some of the space there. So now it's 4x4 minus this stake, which is in the middle of it. So yes, it kolshu of any thickness. Miyato, it is memayited. It takes away from the space. Therefore, it's not 4x4 tefachim, which is 16 square tefachim. It's 16 square tefachim minus the thickness of this stake, this yased, right? And therefore, it would take away from the square footage, and therefore it's no good. It's no longer considered just a yachid. However, it has to be taller. This thing that you stick in has to be basically more than 3 tefachim. If it's more than 3 tefachim, then that area is not usable. If it's lower than 3 tefachim, then the area is still usable, even where the stake is in. You can include that area. And even if it's not 3, it's no good. My time, because people won't use that area, right? If you have something sticking out of the ground 2 tefachim, it becomes annoying, and therefore they don't use that area on top of this platform, and therefore it should not be included, and therefore you don't have 16 square amos, right? You only have 15.8 square amos. And even if it's taller than 3, you can still count it. My time, what's the reason? Even if it's over, you can still hang things on it. So even if it's 4 tefachim, you can still count it, and therefore it doesn't take away from the square footage on top. So that was just another topic of being memayit, something which really has nothing to do with the height of walls that we've been talking about. So Amar le Rav Acha b'rei the Rav Ashi Malu Kulbi say this mahu. Let's say you have this platform. Okay, so you said 1 is a mite. Let's say you stick 15 stakes all around, right? All around, right? You picture those those beds, with all the nails, sticking out. They have, all the cartoons or whatever. They lie on, someone like steps on them, walks across, and they drink water, and everything holes come out, right? So you have all the pins sticking out, right? And then what happens? And so it's full. So the question is this considered to be right? Does it lose its surface area on top, and therefore it's nothing, or is it still considered a shasi yachid? Right? Do you not hear that which Rabbi Yochanan taught? What did he teach? Let's say you dig a pit, okay? You dig a pit a couple tefachim down, and then you take the dirt from inside, and you basically make an area around it from the dirt, right? So from the top of the dirt, right, which extends above, the ground, to the bottom of the pit, is considered to be 10 tefachim, and including the width of the walls of the dirt, the mound around it, it's 4 by 4. So over there, in that case, it works. So the Gemara says, why does that work over there? You don't have a full 4 by 4 you can work on top of, right? You have the edges, but inside it goes down. So why is the top considered to be 4 by 4 if it's not 4 by 4, right? The edges are 4 by 4, but there's a big hole in the middle that the entire top surface area is not usable. What can you say? You can go ahead and, let's say, put a piece of hard plastic on top and now use it. You can put a piece of 4 by 4 plastic on top of the walls of this pit, right? And now it's usable. Now, so to our case, you can put something on top of all these pegs, right, which are stuck into the top of this 4 by 4 thing, stand, or in Rosh Hashanah, and therefore, since you can put a piece of hard plastic on top and then use that area of 4 by 4, therefore, that's the reason why it's still considered to be a Rishus Hayach. And Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Kaisel Asara Tzarich Sulam Arba Asar Lahatiro. Says Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, a wall which is 10 tefachim tall, needs, in order to basically say that this ladder is now not just a ladder up against the wall, but basically it's like like stairs going over it. All you need a ladder which is 14 tefachim. Why? Because as if you recall before, right? I don't think it's Pythagorean theorem, but right, I guess it is Pythagorean theorem, right? If two sides are equal, right? This goes straight, and this is 10, and this is 10. That means this is 10 times 1.4, right? 10 times 1.4 is 14 tefachim. So if you have a diagonal at 45 degrees, so basically you take a ladder of 14 tefachim, and then you have it at a 45 degree angle, and now that's considered you can walk up. It's not too steep and it's not too narrow, or you can have it more narrow, but the minimum is 14 in order for it to be basically walkable, or to be able to traverse over the wall. So he says even 14. And Rav Yosef Amar Afilu Shloisha Sar Mashu. No, it can still be at 45 degrees. However, it doesn't have to go to the top of the wall. It can be within 1 tefach of the wall. Therefore, all you need is 13 and Mashu, right, within 1 tefach. And Abai Omar Afilu Echad Asar Mashu. No, even 11 and a half. Put a 45 degree angle, but make sure it's within 3 tefachim of the top. So all it has to come is to the point of 7.1, and therefore basically 7.1 plus 7.1 times 7.1 times 1.4 would be a little more than 11. In Abayom Afilu Echadasar Umash Ravuna Bredevshu Amar Afilu Shiva Mashu, even 7.1 ladder. In other words, why? Because he says you don't need to put it on a 45 degree angle. Rather, you can put up vertically against the wall, and as long as it comes within 3 tefachim of the top of the wall, it becomes walkable. And Amar Rav, and says Rav, Sulam Zakuf might Gemara V'Loyadina my time. So it says Rav, basically on the same note that we just said, that a ladder is, if it's vertical, then it could be mamayit. It does take away from the height of the wall. In other words, since you can travel over the wall very easily because there's a ladder there, therefore you do not count that area, and therefore it's considered to be over the wall, and you can connect the two chatzeros. My time, what's the reason? My time, excuse me, and it doesn't know why. So Amar Shmuel says Shmuel v'lo yada abba atama. You don't know the reason. Right? It should be no difference in a case of itztaba. We saw it yesterday, right? If you have one stand with another stand on top of it, as long as it's within 3 tefachim and it's in front of the wall, it takes away. Why does it work? Because even though it's vertical, right, there's no stairs sort of to walk over to it. You just go straight up. That's where the itztaba is. So to the ladder, if the ladder is right next to the wall, that's considered to be mamayit the wall, and therefore it's not an issue. And Amar Rabbi Mechia, the kalim shebabavel ein sirkum keva. If you have this heavy dekalim, the palm trees in Bavel, and you put them in front of a wall, they don't need to go ahead and be keva. They don't have to go ahead and be basically stuck in the ground or made permanent. Why is that my time? Because their weight, because they're so heavy, they're not going to be moved, and therefore it's like a permanent structure which is sitting in front of the fence. And therefore, since you basically just can like step on these palm trees and get over very easily, therefore it's considered to be the height of the wall, and therefore the two chatzeros on the other sides, on two sides of the fence, can be are considered to be connected.
Wait,
And
are these palm trees in the ground? Are they
so
moving them towards
right now? This is not in the ground yet. We're actually going to be covering trees, right? Which is a good question, right? Trees, because trees are moksa, right? We'll get to trees, but this is just referring to like you have logs, like a big log or something that you place in front of there. And for Rav Yosef Amar, and Rav Yosef, Kabasan, Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yosef, one second, Kabasan, Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yoshia. Right, says the ladders of Bavel do not need to go ahead and be made permanent and fixed into the ground. My time was the reason. And once again, since they're very heavy ladders, they're not moved around, and therefore they're basically considered to be permanent, a permanent way of being mamayit the wall. And man dever sulamas kol sheken dekalim. And the one who says the ladders, right, which are only 100 pounds, certainly the logs, those are permanent. However, man dever dekalim, but those who say that only who stated the brisa, the halacha is only the palm trees, because those are 200 pounds. Salamos low, but the ladders are not as heavy. Therefore, perhaps those are not as permanent structures, and therefore maybe those need to either be fixed to the ground. And if they're fixed to the ground, then maybe it does not be might according to that opinion. Fine. New question. 5 lines from the bottom. So you have basically we discussed having a ladder. So one of the things of the ladder is it has to be 4 tefachim wide. So let's say you have a ladder. Right, it's broken in the middle. Right, your ladder. Even better. Let's say you had a ladder that was 3 tefachim. So here's what you do: you break it in half, right? Because ladder of 3 tefachim is too narrow; it doesn't do anything. So break it in half, and then basically you attach each rung with straw in the middle on each rung, and therefore now you have a ladder which is 4 tefachim wide. Right. So you have you put straw basically connecting each rung. Since you can't go ahead and step on the straw, you'll fall through. So therefore, it's not a good ladder, and therefore, it's not considered to be a ladder to connect it to chaseros. So kashi mikam the sulam biyam. So let's say it's a very narrow ladder, and it says, I know what to do. I'll just extend each rung from the outside of the straw. And the middle is strong because the middle is normal was where you step. Right? The sulam biyam. So what's halach there? So hare kafa reg oilaban. Since you can go ahead and walk in the middle. Right, and the widening with the straw, I guess, gives it stability. So therefore, it's considered to be a good ladder of 4 tefachim for you to go over. Now, turn the page. Chakak lahashlim the kaisel bekama. So let's say you have a narrow ladder. You have a narrow ladder. It's vertically up against the wall. And you can't really extend it, but he said, I have an idea. I will go ahead and extend by digging into the wall, carving into the wall, basically extended rungs into the wall. Here's a good picture. I'll show you guys. So you see there's a thin ladder, and then he wants to go ahead and extend, basically dig in. So how much do you have to dig in? Is it the whole height? Is it 3 tefachim? What is it? So as long as it's 10 tefachim, then then it's considered, because that's the bottom, that's where it's more difficult to climb. Once you do that, and they have a narrow ladder on top, that is not an issue. So Amarle Mali Kamaso. What about the if the whole thing is carved? Then you have to go ahead and you have to carve the, in other words, if you don't have a thin ladder, rather you just carve a ladder into the wall. And carving a ladder into the wall, you need it to carve it to be 4 tefachim the entire way. You can't just, carve 4 tefachim wide up to 10 tefachim. And then above that, you can go, 2 tefachim or 3 tefachim, right? It has to be the whole thing, has to be carved. If you're carving the whole thing, then you have to carve it completely 4 tefachim wide all the way up. Umayshna, what's the difference? So so over there in that case, right? It's easier to go ahead and to go up, right? It's easier to go up if you have a real ladder as opposed to a ladder which is carved in. The ladder is carved in, and therefore you need the assistance of the extra widening throughout the entire height. So Rav Yosef me Rabba Asul Elon Sulam Mahu. Let's say you have a tree. You have a tree, and therefore the tree makes it possible to go ahead and climb over the wall. All right, you have a tree able to climb over the wall. Can that tree? Now remember, in order to connect a wall, we talk about a pesach, right? A pesach, an opening between the two. Obviously, there's a wall there, but you can get over the wall, so that makes it a pesach. That makes it sort of an entrance, a portal from one to the other. So can you use something, a tree, but what's the issue with a tree that's in the ground? A tree in the ground is muksa, or you can't use a tree on Shabbos. You might come to break off and to ride an animal, right? So there's a you can't use a live tree. So can you use the tree as your quote unquote your Pesach? Mahu. So tiboy the Rebbe, tiboy the Rabbanan. So you can actually ask this question according to Rebbe and the Rabbanan. It's machlokes the Rebbe and the Rabbanan, which we saw earlier on Daf Lamed Beis, about a person who goes ahead and puts his eruv in a tree. So the question is, you put an eruv in a tree. So the question is, you have to go ahead and set it up before Shabbos. So that's ben Ishmasho. So the question is it derabanan? Are we geyser isuri derabanan during ben Ishmasho? So that's my machlokes between Rebbe and the Rabbanan. And so you can say like this. So tiboy le Rebbe, you can ask this question whether you can use a tree in our case to be this pesach between the two chatzeros, or you can ask the Rabbanan. So the Rebbe ad kan lo yikam Rebbe Hasam called avashom b'shem shavus like gazer love. Right, that which we said, anything which is a shvus, reading geyser, and therefore you can go ahead and use it, right, as your, you can go ahead and use it as your eruv, because you put an eruv in a tree, and a tree is muksa, but we say over there, hani mili. The reason why I was why over there, hani mili ben ishmashos is mutter because it's during ben ishmashos. Since ben ishmashos is that we're not geyser trees, right? There's no gzeir derabanan during ben hashmashos. So therefore, the time when he set up the eruv, it was permissible. Therefore, he can leave it there. But to have it be your pesach throughout the entire day, in order to be able to go from one side of the chutzah to the other to use the tree, that would not be good. Or maybe even call the rabbanan. Pischahu, maybe you could say it's a Pesach, even though in the case of the Eruv, they said you can't go ahead and use the tree for your Eruv. Maybe over here, we can say this technically is a Pischa. It is a portal between one to the other. The Ar Yehuda Rabbi Yela, right? And basically, you have a lion chasing you away. In other words, it is a Pesach. We have a lion chasing away. The line here is the Issur D'Rabbanan. Yes, it is a portal. I just can't go through this Pesach because it's Issur D'Rabbanan to go ahead and climb the tree. But nevertheless, Lamaisa is considered to be a Pesach between the two Chatzeros. So maybe it would be okay, even according to the Rabbanan. So that was one question. So the question was by a tree. So we want to say it's the same machlokas between Rebbe, or perhaps it's not even the same machlokas between Rebbe and the Rabbanan, who discuss the case of setting your eruv instead of in the chutzner, you put it in the tree. Is that okay? Now, what another case? Because it wouldn't be accessible because trees are muksa. And then what about this case? What about asuli asher sulam? You want to go ahead and let's say a tree is usable, but an asherah tree, one that was worshipped or used for avodas kachavim, used for idol worship, you're not allowed to get any hana. You can't get any benefit. So maybe if you're using a tree, right, for benefit as your Pesach, that would be forbidden. So Mahu, what's the halacha there? So Gemara says, once again, maybe it's another machlokas related to this. So, Tiboy the Rabbi Yehuda, and Tiboy the Rabbanan. You can ask according to Rabbi Yehuda, or you can ask according to Rabbanan. There's machlokas on Daf. Which daf is this? And Lamed Aleph about placing your eruv on a grave, right? One is not allowed to go ahead and use a grave for his own benefit. So if I place my eruv there, am I using it for my own benefit? And therefore it's a shiloh. Rabbi Yehuda says it's mutter to go ahead and put it on a grave, and the Rabbanan say it's aser. But over here, maybe even they would say the opposite, right? To brother Rabbi Yehuda, ad kan like Rabbi Yehuda hasam the mutter liknais bayis b'isur hana. Over there, you want to go ahead and basically just acquire the spot, but you're not using the spot anymore. You're just leaving your Erev there. In order to for your Tchum Shabbos, you can go ahead and extend 2,000 amos. After Shabbos starts, you don't need to use the grave at all. The grave you're not using anymore. You just need to establish in the beginning, and then from there you get 2,000 hours all directions. But in our case, right, when you're using it as a Pesach, you're going to want to go ahead and use this Asherah tree, which is forbidden from Hana, just like the other case. So maybe it's different. Oh, Dilma, Afilu Rabbanim, even according to Rabbanim, maybe who the Rabbanim over there say you can't go ahead and use it. Oh, Dilma, Afilu, you can't use a grave as your to place your Erev. Maybe over here you could use it. You can use this Asherah tree as your Pesach between the two Chatzeros. And the Ari, the Rabbi Yaleh, but there's a lion, right? Basically, will chase you away. I.e., the Isser Hana will chase you away. The Isser Hana will not allow you to go ahead and use, to use this Pesach. But Lamaisa, there is a Pesach between the two Chatzeros, and therefore maybe I can make one Erev between the two Chatzeros. So I'm related to answer the questions. Elan mutter to use a regular tree, even though it's about the climate. Nevertheless, it's mutter because it's considered to be a Pesach. The Asherah and the Asherah tree because Asur Gehana, you can't use it as your Pesach Asura. So Masav Rav Chizda Adarabba. Maybe we should say the opposite. Elon Isser Shabbos Garim Lo. What's the Isser by a tree? It's an Isser Shabbos. You're not allowed to go ahead and climb a tree on Shabbos. So Elon Isser Shabbos Garim Lo Nitasir. Maybe that should be Usser because we're referring to an Isser of Shabbos. And Isser Shabbos should basically say that you can't use an Erev. And Asherah and the Asherah tree. She Isser Davar Acher Garim Lo. And the Isser of the Asherah is not because of the fact that it's the fact that it was worship for Avos Kachavim. Maybe Loni Tasir. It shouldn't be Asir. I'm just thinking right now, it just hit me. Well, even if you say it's the Isser is from Davar Acher, i.e. it comes from Chavim, right? Well, Lamais it's still a tree, right? You can't climb it. So maybe we're talking about the Asherah tree is no longer connected to the ground. Maybe you have to say that. I don't know, because even if you say that, okay, there's still Isser Shabbos because the Isser Shabbos Garimo of climb the tree. Let's say in Isser Chal Isser. So you have to be Mayan and see, understand that question. But anyways, so going on. So maybe we and Itaranami, as we've said in other places. Excuse me. So Master Rav Chizda, the other all right. So Itaranami, Kiyasa Rabin, when Rabin came Amr Belzer, Ramidan sometimes. Anything that Isser Shabbos causes it, such as the tree, Isser is Asr. That is Asr. You can't have that as your Pesach. Therefore, you cannot use this tree as the connection as the Pesach between 2 yards. And Kol Isser Davar Acher Garimlo. And however, the Isser comes from outside, such as Asherah, because you can't get Hana, it's Davar Shasar Hana. Then it is mutter. And Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Masni Hachi, he taught that. And this Elon, and he said no. Lamaisa Elon is plukes to Rabbi Yochanan. It was the same achlokas when it comes to a tree as to be a Pesach as it is to place your eruv there before Shabbos. That's the same achlokas in Rabbi and Rabbanan over there. And Asherah, when it comes to Asherah, is the same achlokas as we saw. But when it comes to a grave, is plukes to Rabbi Yehuda of Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda matters, and Rabbanan say the Asherah will be aser, just like the grave would be aser. Fine. Now Mishnah. Mishnah says, Choritz shebein beis chatzeros. Let's say you have 2 yards. There's no tree in between them, right? Or actually, there's no wall in between them, but there's a ditch. There's a ditch, a deep ditch that you do chatzeros amok asara v'reicha v'dalet, right? It's at least 10 deep and it's wide for some ma'arvin shnayvei ma'arvin necha. Right, you go ahead and you can only make an erev, and each chatzir is separated, and you cannot make one erev, right, because this ditch separates the two. And afilu malikash oitevin, even if it is full of straw, right, or a straw or not wheat, kash, right, shoots. Right. So in these cases, because these are considered to be something that is right, you use it as it's not necessarily permanent, right? It's usually something that you only have there temporarily, right? Such as straw, then you go ahead and you process it or feed the animals or whatever you're going to do with it, but it doesn't remain there. So those things are not considered to be, it's not considered to be ditch that's right, or basically a filled up ditch, right? That you like pouring earth into it is considered to be a ditch. What happens to be just storing other things, but therefore the mice is still a ditch. However, if you go ahead and you fill it mali offer or suros, if you fill it with dirt or with rocks, right? That is a permanent fill, right? You put dirt in, you put rocks in, that's a permanent fill. A permanent fill, basically, it's no longer a ditch in between. It's like there's ground in between. And therefore, the two chatzeros are like one. And therefore, since it's like one, you can only make one Eruv. Each one cannot make an Eruv for the other one. You can't make independent Eruvin. If you go ahead and you place a board over the, like a little bridge, right? A little bridge over this ditch, but it has to be it has to be at least 4 tefachim wide. So too, two balconies are facing one another, and if you want to go ahead and connect it, you connect it with a board. Ma'arvin shnayim, you can go ahead and be ma'arv, even though you can say the bridge doesn't work, and you can make 2 eruvin and basically separate them. The imratzon, if they want ma'arvin echad, they can go ahead and make one. So now, if you have basically a little bridge, that board that you put over, take a piece of plywood, right? You put it over, we can come across that. Can basically gives you the option, gives you the flexibility of either I can do it as 1 because it's connecting, or it's 2 because it's only a board that's 4 tefachim and it's not something that was permanently filled in. However, pachas mikan, if the board was less than 4 tefachim, then ma'arvin shnai ve'im eruvin echad. Then it's too small. Then it's not considered to be connected, and therefore you have to make an eruv of 2, and you cannot go ahead and make an eruv for 1. So let's just see the Gemara real quickly. The Gemara says, "I v'teven loy chayitz," and straw does not fill it. It should not make it permanent. Tonight we learn in Mishnah, if you have a pile of straw in between 2 chatzeros, it's 10 tefachim tall. Right? It's considered to be 2 different chatzeros and not 1. So you see over here, this pile of straw is permanent enough to basically separate 2 chatzeros. So why in this case is the straw not considered to be permanent enough to basically fill the ditch and for it to be considered to be one chatzer? Some Rabbi says no. When it comes to a wall, when it comes to a wall, to be a wall, you can be straw. That's not a big deal. But in order to separate something, when it comes to chatzitza, right, basically to fill up something, if the person is mevatalit, right, in other words, he's not going to go ahead and use it again, then it would then it's considered to be filled. Or in other words, when you put the straw there, you're just temporarily storing the straw because you can use it for another reason. However, but if not, however, if he's not mevatel because he's going to go ahead and use it later, right? Then it wouldn't separate. But if he goes ahead and he puts it there because I'm not going to use it ever again, I just put the straw here and people will just walk upon it, then it would be considered to be permanent, and therefore, since it's permanent, it would be considered to be filled. But normally, it's not because they use the straw for something else. All right, we'll stop here. The 2 dots. Shkoyach, everybody. Everybody have a wonderful day and stay safe. When do they change the clocks? This month to Shabbos? Yeah. Then we have normal.
Yes, this month is Shabbos.
I was looking at when I was driving home. I was looking at what time sunrise was. It was at 7:16 today. I'm like, it's still dark when I left Shul. I'm like, oh, it's a little cloudy, but it's also 7:16. So.
Next week.
There's a meme going around that says we don't want to change